if you don't mind. I'll give a little bit of context to help you, but this is for item 5.4, which is the Elora Model Village funding request. And just to give you guys a bit of context, that I've been invited to be a candidate for the board of directors for the Wellington County Historical Society. Now, all of that's happened since our last meeting, and I've been a guest to their March meeting, which was a few days after. So because of that connection and that association, I would define that myself as a conflict of interest. So I would imagine when we get to that point that Devlin will probably excuse me from any decision-making or discussion or any voting on that part.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll just put you into the waiting room and then bring you back in when we're finished with that item.
Yeah, okay, so thanks for listening. I did want to give you guys some context to it so you can understand where it comes from.
Thank you, Don.
Yep.
Okay, and before we move any further, I think what I should do now is just welcome the newest member of our committee, Kirk McElwain, who is going to be our council representative. And so welcome, Councillor McElwain, to the committee. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I recognize you, and I'm somewhat familiar with you from council meetings and other parts. I know you've been a long-time resident of Center Wellington, I think on several terms as a councillor for Ward 2. So perhaps with that, I could just ask you to just say hello to the committee and add anything you care to say. Go ahead.
Thanks, Philip. Yeah, I'm excited to be on the Heritage Committee. It has been one of my interests for probably all 3 terms I've been on council up till now. And I'm particularly interested in seeing things, the Heritage Conservation District work going forward, and it's kind of in one of my, really, it's an area I've been very involved with at certain points throughout the whatever it's been now, 15 years I guess I've been on council. So looking forward to it, and looking forward to joining all of you and working with you in the best way possible.
Well, okay, thank you very much. I just might add that we have one other new member, Christine the Notebeck, and she's just been with us for 1 meeting. So by all means, if something's going on and some term you hear is used or something you want explained, back up. I'm sure there'll be others who would benefit from having an explanation as well. So don't be shy about speaking up and just asking what's going on if there is some aspect you want clarification on. Okay. So with that, we can just move to confirm the meeting agenda by consensus. And it looks like we have a consensus on that. So we can confirm the agenda. Item 4, approval of the minutes from March the 9th. And again, if there were no errors or omissions, then we can do that by consensus as well. And so approval, the minutes have been approved. Okay, thank you, folks. That brings us to action item number 5, action item, new business. And I see we're at 5.1, which is the partial demolition of a listed property, 64 Price Street in Elora. And this is the rear addition only. And I believe everyone's got the material in the agenda. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. And perhaps we have also 2 delegations here. Aidan McCoy, who is, I believe, with the design team, and the property owners, Claire Burns is what I see here. And Hi, Claire. And her,
Mark Hemingway.
yeah, thank you very much. I just see the one name, so, okay. Great, welcome to the meeting. Maybe I'll start by calling on Mariana to just give us some background to the application for the demolition. And then, yeah, go ahead, Mariana.
Thank you. So the property at Price Street, 64 Price Street, is listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, and the demolition is proposed at the rear. So it's the rear portion of the existing building, and I believe was constructed significantly later than the original part of the building. And there is a, as you can see in the agenda, there are plans for the proposed new addition, which is a two-story addition, and then some landscape improvements at the back. So basically that's the explanation of why it's before the committee. So just because there are some newer members present as well, and for some clarification, this is a listed heritage building on the municipal register, listed as non-designated. So the committee's decision making ability today relates to the demolition request. So a listed property has a 60-day notice requirement under the Heritage Act to notify the township of an intention to demolish any part of the structure. So that notice has been provided. And what that means is that the committee and council can decide whether to allow the demolition to proceed or to basically recommend, the committee would recommend to council, and council could state a notice of intention to designate. So designation is the only means to stop a demolition from occurring. So that is just the context I want to give the committee and what the decision, what is being asked. The redevelopment plans are provided just for some information to the committee. So it's not, again, it's not designated, so it's not a heritage permit requirement. The committee is not really necessarily commenting or deciding on the new design. It's the decision is on the demolition. However, the committee, if it feels that anything is substantially inappropriate, can always make a decision or a recommendation to council to designate to protect a property. And that's just the background context. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of information that's being provided. Does anyone on the committee then have any questions regarding the demolition per se, specific to that aspect of what we're looking at, that they'd like to put to the folks we've got here? Sorry, maybe what I'll do is let Aiden, do you want to go ahead and just, you had something to say there first?
No, I was just saying I'm part of the people that can answer the questions.
Okay.
But thanks for having us. And yeah, it's a proposed design right now. And we're willing to hear what you guys have to say and see where we go.
Right. Well, okay. So I've got Don, I think, up first here.
Yeah, if you don't mind. So we're talking about the board and batten edition on the back, the blue one. Is that the one we're talking about?
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to say I did look at the renovation, and I think you're doing a real tasteful job of maintaining the front of the house for sure and the character of it. So I'm very pleased with that, and it looks like you're gonna have a beautiful property from the design. So I think you've done some great work with that design. But I do believe that it is, from what I can see from it, particularly from the street, you're doing a nice job of maintaining the front of the house in sort of the character in which it is. So I'm very pleased with that part of it. And I think that the renovation that you have proposed here looks like it's going to be a very beautiful property when it's finished. So in my opinion, I have no concern about the demolition. I do see it as bringing more character to the house in many ways. But I'll let the rest of my colleagues comment on it too, if they wish.
Okay, thank you, Don. Any other comments to the demolition at all? Go ahead, Aaron.
Do you have a date, Mariana? You mentioned that the addition was significantly later than the original house. Do we have any sense of the date of the addition?
No, I don't. I'm not sure if the owners have that information.
We don't know exactly, but we think that it was in the early 1980s, the late 1970s, early 1980s. It's certainly not it's not older than that. We've been the owners for, it'll be 13 years this summer. When we bought it, the board and batting was not waterproof, so it wasn't sealed properly to the foundation. So we actually had to do substantial repair work on the board and batting. But it's just a very, rickety is too harsh a word, but it's not a very well put together extension. My mom likes to say that when we first bought it, that if she leant against the bathroom wall to dry her feet, she would have ended up naked in the garden. So, so we're just, we're trying to put something tasteful on the back that'll be a long-term solution, because we love the community and we want to stay here.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Okay, I recognize Nico there.
Just in terms of keeping with the historical merit of the front of the house, can I ask how close you will be in terms of, I presume that the addition is also a red brick. Will that be in any proximity to what's existing currently?
So no, we actually did the setback intentionally so that we could kind of be able to distinguish the brick one from the other, to try and match that brick that's old, almost maybe impossible. So we did actually do it intentionally to give it that distinguishing factor. So when you meet the two together, if you put them side by side, you actually wouldn't, like, you would notice the difference. But because of that setback, it allows us to play with the eye of it.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for the owners or the design? I don't see, I really like the style, the four square style. There's a lot of them around it. They seem to lend themselves to this sort of development, and it allows you to bring the home into the 21st century in many ways, which I think is wonderful. And so clearly the demolition will allow you to do that. So yeah, if we don't have any other comments from the committee, then I think what we would need to do then is just pass a motion that we do not object to the demolition. So Devlin, can you perhaps give us the wording of that motion?
Sure. What I have here is that Heritage Center Wellington does not oppose the partial demolition of the rear addition at listed property 64 Price Street, Elora.
Do we have anybody who would move that? I see Nancy. Okay, and then a seconder. I'm not sure if you're seconding, Christine, or you're just moving your camera. Okay, I think I'll go with Don then. All right. So we've got Nancy moving the motion, and Don is seconding it. Is there anyone who would like to have any questions to the motion? Okay, if not, I would just go ahead and say all in favor of the motion. Please indicate by raising your hand so I can. Okay, and opposed? So I don't see anyone opposed. Is that? I've got my big screen on here. Okay, so that was a unanimous decision. Then the motion is passed, and that will be a recommendation. Will go to council. Then is that correct, Mariana? Is that the next step?
Yes, that would go to the next council meeting. And then I will confirm with the owners and applicant that the whether it's been approved or not, and then whether they can proceed with the demolition and building permit.
Yeah. So great. Well, thank you very much to everyone who came to answer questions. I know seem pretty straightforward, but sometimes it's very helpful to have the owners and the designers here, the architects to answer questions if something does come up. So thank you for being in attendance tonight, and good luck. Enjoy the process.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
You're welcome. Okay, so we've got another similar not quite the same, but another partial demolition, 5.2. And that was, just want to get back to the agenda here. So partial demolition of a listed property, again, 255 Hill Street West. This is in Fergus. Everyone's got the information available there and hopefully had a chance to look at it. So, and I believe is there anyone here to speak to this, Evelyn?
I believe the applicant intended to be here, but I don't see them here in the waiting room.
Okay, I think Mariana has quite a bit of information on that. So why don't we go ahead and have Mariana give us the background, and then we can have a little discussion about it.
Sure. So this property is listed again on the Heritage Register, and they are, due to the condition of the building, they're proposing to demolish the front portion, which is the original dwelling on the property, the sort of yellow or buff brick color. And there was a 2-story rear addition put on the property some time ago. I'm not sure when. They're proposing to keep that rear 2-story addition and replace the building at the front. It will be, I think it will be a little bit larger, and it will be 2 stories. I think there was a concept drawing attached for some context. Again, the committee's decision is about the demolition and can discuss the proposed new build, whether it's appropriate. If the committee doesn't consider appropriate, designation is the only way to stop a demolition. But also I will add that this property is located adjacent to a designated property next door. However, I can speak to the heritage attributes if I believe the heritage attributes were mostly related to the facade of that adjacent building. So that's the context of this one. And there is, I believe, some information that came from the heritage engineer on this project, who did an assessment of the property of the building and determined that it was actually a wood structure that had a brick veneer put on it at some point later. And then the research also that we obtained from the county archives on this property showed that it is a wood frame property, and it was shown as a wood frame property historically, and that it was the brick was added at some point. So that's the background and context for this property. I can answer any questions. I know the owner did intend to attend the meeting, so I'm not sure where he is, but.
Okay. If I just understand this right, it's the portion of the building at the back is what's going to remain. Is that correct? And it's the brick at the
Yes.
front? Yeah, the brick.
That's right.
portion, which is, and it turns out that brick was added over
Yes.
top of and there really is no frame underneath it.
Right. So if you look at I forwarded some information that came from the heritage engineer, and there was a photo attached. So they actually did some work that revealed the original framing, and then that the brick was added on top later. And I think that what was mentioned was that due to the original frame construction, it was not really done very well. And that was the reason for some of the shifting of the structure itself, causing significant deterioration in the brick and in the structural integrity of the building.
Okay, question, Nico?
Do we know what the date of the original home is?
Yes, I think it was in the information that was circulated, but I'd have to pull it up here.
I think about 1871, maybe somewhere around
That's
there.
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
There is another significant stone building on the other side. There's the red brick on the one side that's designated. There's a significant stone building on the other side. Other than this appearing before this committee, would either of those neighbors have any idea of what is intended?
No, no, this isn't really typically even a planning application. All it would be a building permit. So there's no public circulation or notice given on a building permit or even a site plan application if it was, but the neighbors would not be notified. But there would be a building permit notice that has to be posted in the window that's visible once they obtain their permit.
Thank you.
Don?
Yeah, I would agree with Nico too, is that it's in my neighborhood, so I actually pass it every day when I go on my walks and stuff, and that it is both sides of it are really nice heritage homes. And I have a friend that actually has a red brick house that's there. I would say that it's not noticed because of the other two houses. The addition may actually be quite noticed because of the new construction that it'll be. But the other thing I certainly know from street view of it, by walking by it, it is in very bad shape. So like if you see it in person, pictures do not give it justice to even what it looks like in person. So I can certainly understand that there might not even be integrity in the structure itself. Like I think about the neighbors in terms of, they have two heritage homes on both sides of it. It's a heritage home in itself, but it's one in which has been sort of hidden behind this one layer of brick, which has not necessarily been done correctly too. So we have kind of structural problems with it also. And like I said, from if you walk by the house, you certainly can see those structural issues even with the naked eye, right? So I do have the same concerns that Nico has about the not secrecy of it, but the fact that they'll just all of a sudden find out that it's being demolished and without any. But that's just how the policy is, right? Of how this works, right? So, but I do have the same concern. Concern about it being demolished is really for us to decide. No, I won't mention that. I won't get to that until everyone else has spoken. So, but I can certainly feel the same that Nico says. But I have also witnessed it in person quite a few times walking by the house, so I can certainly attest to what I've seen in terms of its structure. So,
Sherry?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it doesn't look like anybody's living in this portion of the house. It's just sitting there, I guess, next to the main building that they're actually living in that space. So this space has just been uninhabited for, I guess, for some time.
Yeah, Mariana, did you have any info on that?
I don't know. I did visit the property. I'm not totally sure, but it did look like it was vacant, that front portion. It looked like they were living in the back, but I can't be totally certain about that. I didn't have that information.
I think anything that would be done to improve this home would be in our best interest. The facade here, it looks like it has a broken back, like the roof line. So it's not a safe structure. It's not an appealing structure. And I would worry for people's safety if they did use it. So I'm leaning towards letting them take it down and refreshing.
Okay. Don?
and I do think the other thing for us to consider is that the heritage quality of the house, which is it was probably a board and batten, I would imagine, or a wood frame, at least is what it was originally. That's all hidden behind a layer of insulation and brick. So what we're actually seeing is not a heritage home. We're seeing the ghost of a heritage home that's behind it too. So yeah, and I know the property in terms of just by walking by it. And to answer the question about, I think what Sherry, what you were asking, it's kind of an addition that the addition behind is quite nice, and it's got solar panels on it and lots of other aspects to it. But I think it has one single access. It's probably through the original door in the back of the house is maybe all they have to access it. So it's not even a full part of it's almost like you'd have to go through a hallway to get to this older part of the house. Because maybe that's the best way to describe it. If you look at the side view of on the minutes, you might be able to see what I'm getting at there. They're kind of two houses almost separate. Yeah.
Right. I just wonder if they waited for it to be in that condition before they decided that they were going to take it down.
I don't even know if they're maybe they're new owners. I'm not sure, if Mariana, if you know anything. Are they the owners for a long time?
Not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, have that information.
It'd be helpful if they were here to answer all these questions.
I just emailed again just to see if he's planning on attending, but
Do we defer? Can we defer it for that reason, or is that even?
If you have objections to the demolition, then I would suggest you defer it, but I'm not, I'd have to look at when we actually receive the information, because technically council is supposed to make a decision within 60 days. And if we don't state an intention to designate within 60 days, then we're not supposed to withhold a demolition permit.
And I'm not suggesting to defer it. So, I mean, personally, the demolition seems to make sense to me, but without the owners to answer these other questions, I just didn't know if that was anything that we feel is necessary.
Do you have any, did you have any follow-up for that, Mariana? No, okay. Nancy, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of understanding the role of to Don's point, in the fact that the bricks really, what is the heritage part? It's the part in behind. And from what I understand, if I read it correctly, it's not structurally sound even in behind, because it wasn't really built properly. And that's why the bricks are failing. So the bricks really aren't the heritage part, it's the piece in behind. And if it's not structurally sound, then would we be able to object? Like, to have it go back to the original heritage building, they'd have to remove the bricks and then redo or somehow reconstruct what was there before. And it's not really clear that we know what that is. So in our role, what are we really saving from heritage by saying they can't demolish it because the bricks really the part of the heritage designation? Like, when was it designated? I guess.
Well, it's a listed property. Yeah, so it's not even a designated property.
Right. Oh, okay. So if it's listed, then what are we really looking at? I'm just trying to understand in terms of what would be the factors for us to say you can't demolish it. So then their option would be repair the bricks, reinforce it somehow so that it's habitable, because otherwise it sounds like, and from the pictures that I'm looking at, it's not structurally sound for them to live in.
Yeah, we would have to, I believe we would have to have some inclination to feel that this property warranted designation based on what we're looking at. And that would be the only option in terms of saving it from being demolished.
But I guess that goes back to my question, then what would be designated, the bricks or the structure beneath?
Well, whatever you felt was worthy of designating, but that would be the process. We would then go through that process of trying to determine that. But I think, Marianne is going to bail me out here.
Well, no, I can just add, when we designate an entire property. So the bylaw actually runs against the property itself. That's how it gets registered. And then the bylaw speaks to the 3 values under the Heritage Act. So design value, contextual, and historical. So I provided some research that we got, and there really isn't very much in the way of historical value here. The contextual value could be how it contributes to the neighborhood, but and whether it's a landmark or not. I think there were some comments made that it wasn't really a landmark on the street, but also the last would be the physical value. So any physical elements that you're designating to protect, which are called heritage attributes, and those are the ones that have to be protected over time, they need to relate to how it's valuable. So you could say that, you know, if you want to say that the property is structurally valuable, like the architecture or the physical design or element, then you would have to say what part of that. So is it the form? Is it sort of the three bay facade, the center hall plan? Is it the yellow bricks? Is it just the pitch of the roof? So those are the elements you would get into when you write the designation bylaw. And that's what the designation itself is. It runs against the property, but the bylaw itself actually specifies what is significant about it and what that owner would need to maintain over time. So if they decide to choose to change anything about it, they would need a heritage permit. That's the difference when something is designated, is that it needs to go through the heritage permit process. And even if it is designated, they can request to demolish it if needed. For example, if it was damaged in any way or something like that, there's abilities to request demolition of a designated property, but then you would have to generally de-designate it.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. Nancy, good question. Does that answer your, yeah? Okay, well, you know, thank you for asking that, because it might seem, you know, maybe it's good to go over these factors again for everyone, just to understand, you know, the nature of the differences between a listed property and our desire to, or the owner's ability or request to demolish, and the differences between the listed and then a designated property. Any other questions then on this before we, sorry, okay, I see Aaron and then Don.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's not so much a question, but I think sort of based on the criteria that Mariana outlined and based on the information that we've been given in regards to the research and the current condition, I think it would, I think it has value in terms of its age and sort of looking at the narrative of the property within the context of the neighborhood. Like, it's quite a small property. So, I mean, there's definitely history there, and there's some associated people with it. I think one of the residents was designated or was Citizen of the Year in the 80s. But I think at the same time, to sort of meet those three criteria of sort of contextual value, architectural value, and associative value would maybe be tough to go for like a designation on the property. So
Okay,
that's my 2 cents.
excellent. Thank you for that comment. If there aren't any other then comments to the, so I'm sorry, Don, you're right. Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I just wanted to say that I didn't want to, I'm almost speaking as I'm the owner of it because of the way I was describing it, but it's because of firsthand knowledge of it. But I would agree with both Aaron and Nancy and certainly the way in which Mariana framed it too is very helpful. A question I wanted to see, I don't know if it's appropriate or not for us to ask this of them, but you guys are aware of the resident plaques that you see around people's homes from that time period. And I would imagine there was one that was made for this home because of its age. I certainly know both neighbors have them in their window. Does everyone know what I'm talking about? You know, like in general,
are you talking about the wooden
black
ones?
the black and white. So it would be interesting to ask them, if we can ask them a question, if that still does, if they still own that, because that might be something that could be adhered to the front of their new home to identify that it was a heritage home at one time and who the occupant was back in 1871. Whether or not they have that. I know that there's a process in which you can have them remade at your own cost, but They certainly, at some point, that house would have had one of those plaques, I'm sure.
Yeah, there was, and they were kind of, I'm not sure what the right term was. A lot of them weren't, I mean, they weren't sourced the same way, or they weren't researched the same way we do a designation now. So they tended to be more,
A census type of,
yeah, and
Yeah.
somebody lived here,
Yeah,
which was quite often what most of the plaques say, is that so-and-so lived here. So that would be appropriate. You could carry that forward even on a new, completely
Yes.
related building.
and that's that.
Yeah.
So obviously, if it's still in their possession, that would be something to preserve. And maybe, we can't tell them what to do with it, but that might be a question to ask of them, if that's very, or they might not even, if they're new owners, they might not be aware that there is, that these did exist, and you can certainly find out who it was. It would probably be, I know that when I looked at it, it went from, the Fergusons owned everything at one time, and they sold the property, and it looked like it traveled through several hands before a house was built on it. But in that 1871, whoever that first person was, probably was who's their name, which name is on the plaque, I would imagine.
Well, it sounds to me like we're getting maybe a little bit now, we've come to the conclusion of this discussion.
Mhm.
And let's keep that in our thinking then, and just move to the question, which is a motion to then approve demolition. Because it sounds to me kind of like that's where we're at, if we're starting to talk about saving that plaque. So Devlin, do you have a motion then that we could bring forward to approve the demolition permit for this property?
Yep. I have that Heritage Center Wellington does not oppose the partial demolition of the front original heritage dwelling at listed property 255 Hill Street West, Fergus.
We have a mover for that?
Bill,
Sorry?
before we move it, can we attach a couple of conditions? Can we request that they take photographs as they do the demolition?
How about we get it on the floor, and then you can have a couple questions. We won't vote on it. We'll just bring the motion forward, and then we can have a discussion about those things. You're
Okay,
about to say?
would that be attached to the motion though?
It might be. We're
Okay.
going to discuss the motion then. We'll just get it on, we'll just bring
Sorry.
it forward, and then, sorry, go ahead. So we just need a mover for the motion. Don, okay, seconder. And Sherry, okay. Yeah, so go ahead, Aaron, you had to speak to the motion?
Sorry to
That's
interrupt. Yeah, I was just wondering if we could have the owners take photographs as they proceed with the demolition to sort of document the structure. And because it is an older home, I think to have those put in the archives would have some merit as a record of kind of the structure and the construction of it as well.
Okay, go ahead, Mariana, and then Nico.
Just to add to that, I typically put that in the staff recommendation that goes in the report when a property is demolished. So I would ask for a photo documentation be submitted prior to the building, the new building being constructed.
Okay, thank you.
Nico, you had a question?
Yes, on that theme, I understand that the brick that is affixed to the house is a newer part of the house, but I don't know how unique the building style, the original building style is. That is the material that's underneath the brick. I don't know how unique that is to this area. So if the historical documentation could include not just the outside facade brickwork, but as the demolition occurs, if there could be a record of what is underneath the brick, that would be appreciated.
Okay, noted. Any other questions to the motion? And I think Don and Mariana can add that question you had, or if there is any actual physical plaque still remaining, that be considered for perhaps restoration and putting on a new building. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think all three recommendations mine included there would be, they seem very appropriate.
So those will be included in the, in your notes then. Is that correct, Mariana? Rather than in the motion itself?
Can I clarify, when you say 3, you're talking about the plaque, the photo documentation, including all the structural components? Was there a third one, or was the third one recommending the demolition?
I think Aaron and Nico were kind of the same. So I would say 2 things. Then.
Okay.
Is that true, Nico? That yours is piggybacks on Aaron? Yeah, okay.
All right. So if everyone's prepared to then vote, I would just say concerning this motion to approve the demolition, the partial demolition of 255 Hill Street West in Fergus. All in favor? Please raise your hand so I can. Okay, and opposed? Okay, by my count, I don't see any opposed. So the motion is carried, and that's unanimous. Okay, thank you, everybody. Moving forward then to 5.3, which is the CHL Study Endorsement. So this has come up on our agenda a couple times, at least more than that. But at the last meeting, I think the report we had was that we would ask for you to consider the CHL study that's been available to you, and consider any questions or forward any questions on it, with the idea that we would, if we would talk tonight about endorsing the study, and then that could be moved to council. So that recommendation could be taken to council. So I'm going to ask Mariana just to bring us up to date on all of that and where we're at and what we're going to be asked to do tonight.
Yes, thanks, Phil. So the CHL study, as you all know, came out in November, and we received a series of comments from the public and agencies. There were 2 agencies, and then I think there were submissions from approximately 14 members of the public. So some were multiple from the same public members, but so I can speak to the sites themselves. So the 18 CHLs, there were no comments that actually impacted the 18 CHLs in themselves, their boundaries. There was one comment that we discussed as a subcommittee. So as some of you or most of you all know, that Nico, Don, and Phil sit on the project team, the subcommittee that has been working through this whole process. And so we reviewed the public comments received, and in terms of the CHLs that were identified, the 18, there were no significant concerns, comments, questions. The one that did come up that was came up from a few different people was the one regarding the Pier Point area. So that was, our consultants had deemed that there wasn't sufficient information yet to draw boundaries around a CHL, but that it did warrant further study. So that is something that we would be taking forward to council. And I'll just explain a little bit again about process here. The study itself is going to be, we're going to take it to council and ask for endorsement. So that would generally be endorsing in principle those 18 sites to call them significant cultural heritage landscapes. The study is part 1 in what or the first step in what the province identifies as conservation. So conservation involves identification, and then it involves the management and protection. So those will stem from this study but require further steps. So each one of the CHLs, we are going to identify as a team how it can be best protected. What are the actions that we actually need to take? We're going to identify whether the action is short, medium, or long term in terms of timing, how long it would take, and then a sense of a cost analysis for each one based on the best means to protect each. So for example, There might be some that we identify as requiring a Heritage Conservation District study and plan in order to implement the protection measures. But the protection is actually offered through the Ontario Heritage Act and designation. That's the main tool. It's not through the study itself. So the study itself does not provide protection for these properties or these CHLs. It provides the identification that says that these areas are significant, and we are looking forward for protection measures for each one, but they will likely be slightly different for each one as well. So that's a bit of a background, but we will be taking to council recommendations regarding each one, further information when the study is asked to be endorsed, so that council has more complete information in front of them when they're making the decision to endorse the study and how to move forward. But each one will have its own sort of budget requirement. Some may be quite simple because some may just be commemoration that's needed, but others may be further study in order to create a heritage conservation district plan and guidelines. So those would require additional funding, which we would need to seek from council. So I hope that clarifies a little bit of the process, but today we're asking the committee to endorse the actual study and the 18 CHLs that have been identified. We can foresee that there might be some minor edits to the report, but nothing significant that would change any of those CHLs that have been identified.
Okay, just as some additional background, did Don or Nico have anything they wanted to discuss as members of the subcommittee, the CHL subcommittee? Don?
Yeah, I first wanted to say that one of the things that I really felt came out in all of this in every single phase, and particularly in the workshops and where the public was involved, that there is a strong passion for heritage in our community. And I really felt that came through in all of the comments from all of the groups, agencies and residents and special interest groups and so on. So I think that's important that did come out of this project, that there is this very strong passion for heritage within our community. And I think that's where, and the length of detail that some people of residents put into their comments was certainly something to give respect to. The fact that they've taken that much time to provide us with so much information in terms of to report to go along with their comments. So we do appreciate all of that. And I also wanted to say that Mariana did a fantastic job of trying to summarize so much of what was given, because you have to understand, they came from all different sources, whether they be an email or a phone call or letters, and they came from many different sources, and she was able to put together a very good summary of it that made it a lot easier for us to spend, I guess, 4 or 5 hours that we've already spent on looking at those comments. So I do pass it on that we really appreciate all the work that you did to help us through that too.
Yeah, for sure. I second that as well. Yeah. And I'm sure Nico does also. Yeah. Nico, go ahead. Yes. Thank you, Don.
Just in terms of what you were saying, Mariana, I guess there are 2 ways at this point that we can proceed on this. One is to partialize the 18 landscapes, cultural heritage landscapes, and the other is to look at the report as a whole and approve that in principle. Am I correct in that assumption that there are 2 ways that we can go on?
I'm unmuted.
You're muted.
There's, when we go to council, perhaps Councillor McElwain can comment on this. When we go to council, we're going to be looking for council to endorse. And I imagine council will be looking for its heritage committee to have reviewed the study and to endorse it or be supportive of it. So I think whether you're endorsing the study in principle or endorsing the 18 CHLs, I would say they go hand in hand, but it's probably best to endorse the study in its entirety, unless there's some concerns about I think if you go forward with just the 18 CHLs, I mean, that's one method of doing it, but it might leave some of the rest of it. There's a lot of background information, a lot of other information, recommendations that were made in the study that might leave council wondering if it's the entire study or just the landscapes. So I'm not sure if Councillor McAway might comment on that to see what's the best way.
Sure. go
I
ahead.
can, I'm sorry, I can really only speak for myself because the other 6 are, as you can probably guess, unpredictable in how they're going to react. But I personally, I would love to see the study and the 18 specified districts come forward at the same time as a package. The only thing I would add to that, and it's probably not realistic, but is if there's a prioritization of the 18 that to come forward, because there are some areas that are probably a higher priority right now than others, is just because of potential activity in the near future. So I think that we need to do whatever we can to be prepared to protect any of those 18 sites in the short term before it goes through the whole process.
Okay, that's an important question there, or a comment, Kirk and Councillor McAway. Thank you for that. Mariana, did you want to sort of help us understand then the process for prioritization?
Yes, sure. So we were planning to do that. You'll recall our conversations that when we're going to be providing further information on each one, and we will be prioritizing. So the consultants have already done part of that, in that of the 18, 9 were the higher priority, shorter term, and the other 9 weren't as high priority. Mostly the other 9 were sort of the publicly owned, or the ones where there wasn't as much threat. But just to your point, Councillor McAway, we will be looking at about a 4 or 5 point criteria system where we will be ranking each one. And so there will be a level of prioritization that will come to council to say, these are sort of the top that we feel need to be addressed sooner rather than later. And they will come forward with more tangible implementation measures so that council is aware of exactly what is going to be needed to protect those in the shorter term, and how long it will take, and what the resource requirements are in order to protect each one of those. So there will be prioritization.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor McAway.
First, you can call me Kirk, Philip.
Thank you.
With the councillor part.
Yeah, thanks.
But just curious, Mariana, do you have a kind of an estimated timeline of how long, after we get through the council process and there's approval and you've got 9 higher priority, and I know that, and a set of criteria, how long then would it take to take the highest priority through to an acceptable conclusion?
I think that's the next step in what we're going to be discussing as a committee. So we're going to be gathering that information. We're going to put a timeline on each one. So then we'll have a cumulative sense of how much they will take, but whether they can be done concurrently or not, I'm not sure. Like, that's something that, as I said, some of them will not be heritage conservation districts per se. That's the one that will take the longest amount of time. So if you're studying something to be a district, for example, the downtown areas, that takes, there's a whole process to establishing a district. You want the community to be involved, so the local residents and business owners, and we have to get a lot of information out there, and then so that's typically done by hiring a consultant. They establish a bylaw that establishes boundaries for the study, and then there's a process that needs to be followed. So they will study each property, whether it's contributing or non-contributing, and its value within the broader CHL, and then determining what the guidelines should be for any change in the future and how that's administered. But the other part of this is what people have to understand as well, is that when you go forward with a plan to conserve something, the corollary to that is always, do we have now the resources behind that? So any additional measures you ever put in for protection, for bylaws and such, you would need somebody to administer those. So, we would bring that forward to council as well. What would be required in order to fully protect this, to put a designation study and a bylaw on it? And then what does that mean in terms of how many heritage permits could we get potentially per year on this, in this CHL? Who's reviewing those heritage permits that come forward? What types of changes need to be captured? Are we going to get down to what color people are going to paint things, or is it just a matter of scale and massing of redevelopment? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered through that process. So it's really hard to say how long it could take, but we will have a much better estimate and approximation when it does come forward to council to say how long each one at least will take. So how long, for example, a heritage district study and plan will take to implement, or how long a commemoration strategy will take to implement, depending on which CHL we're talking about. So short answer is I don't have any concrete timing right now, but we expect to have that shortly. It will come to council before when the study is asked to be endorsed. We will have further information for sure.
I'm just gonna pause for a minute here. I've got a phone that's gonna go to an answering machine in a minute. So just give me 30 seconds. I'll be right back. Just talk amongst yourselves. Okay, I apologize for that. So Nico, I see you're looking to.
Yeah, I just want a little bit of further clarification. Just in terms of the protection aspect of things at this. So what you're saying, Mariana, and I just want to clarify it for anybody that might be listening in. At this point, there is no, we are not bound to protect to any of the 18 landscapes that have been identified. That issue around conservation and protection really won't come into play until such time that council endorses the study, in which case also it's my understanding that compliance with the provincial policy and the Planning Act will also come into play. Is that correct?
So I will compare it to it's basically an inventory. So it's not dissimilar to the inventory that we had for built heritage resources, except these are cultural heritage landscapes. An inventory is an identification tool. The province says our built heritage resources, cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved, but conserved is a process. Conserved is not, it's not an obligation. It is something that municipality must strive to meet all the provincial policies that are in the policy statement. And how it does that is through the Ontario Heritage Act, making its way through by identifying, evaluating, and then putting in protection measures. So the protection measures are provided by the Ontario Heritage Act. If we don't have a bylaw that protects something or that lists something, for example, on a municipal register, where there's actually some teeth to what we call protection. Protection is really being able to tell someone what they're doing, what they need to do to a property, and impacting basically their rights to what they can do with the property. You need to have the protection measures in place, and those are typically afforded by the Heritage Act. So the study in itself is an inventory, and it's not unlike the old heritage inventories we had, until we put those properties on a municipal heritage register where they were given legal authority, or we were given legal authority to stop something from happening or to require something additional to happen on that property. It didn't have, an inventory doesn't offer protection to a property. It provides the tool, it's a tool, right? An inventory is an identification tool, and the Ontario Heritage Act is a tool that a municipality can use to put in place a bylaw or to designate under Part 4 or Part 5. So that's what we're talking about here. So we have properties that are protected under Part 4, which are designated under the Heritage Act, or Part 5 would be the district, would be a full, a multiple property approach. So the protection itself comes later on in the process through the bylaws that we put in place to actually protect.
Would it be correct if I could paraphrase what you just said to say the term conservation as it was used by NICO in the provincial policy statement referring to conserving properties built heritage within a cultural heritage landscape, that term is not the same as what you're discussing in terms of conservation with respect to the Heritage Act?
Well, actually, no, it is. So the term conserved
you're right.
is
Yeah, it
defined
is.
under the
Yes.
Heritage Act.
It-
Yes,
yeah,
under
it-
the provincial
yeah.
policy statement, it's defined. But conserved means there's a process to conservation. It's not
Yes.
automatically, like just because you identify something doesn't automatically mean it is now protected. It means that you should protect it and you have intentions of protecting it, but there's a path to get there. So that's what sort of needs to be understood, is that there is a path to get to final protection where you can basically impact a person's property rights on that property, and you require further studies, for example, like a heritage impact assessment. But the other part of this is that there are tools. So we could put these 18 CHLs in the official plan as an appendix. So again, it has more visibility, and the public and developers and everyone is aware that these areas we're interested in protecting. And we can put in place policies through our official plan, through the under the Planning Act, through our official plan that say, in these CHLs, we would require, for example, a heritage impact assessment to be done for this type of project or for this type of alteration or development that's proposed. So we can make it quite detailed, and that could be sort of an interim measure for these CHLs.
Yes.
Something like a, sort of an adjunct to before we get to formal protection and designation bylaws and districts, we could say that anything within this area might need a heritage impact assessment if we want to put that in our official plan. So that could be that sort of interim protection measure that can be discussed. And that's something that council, again, would need to approve to change the official plan in that respect.
So thank you. It's not easily understood. Well, quite a bit of thought and research, as you have done, Mariana, and others have done on this. Nanette, did you have a question for?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because it sounds like, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Go
Good.
ahead.
No, I just wanted to clarify that this is kind of bringing these areas to people's attention. Is that what I'm understanding? So it's just bringing them to the forefront so that people start thinking about these places may be protected, but it's the first step to doing this.
It's part, yeah, and this identification step is part of the conserve, the term conserve within the Heritage Act.
And I think too, Marianne has kind of explained it to us and calling it a living document. It's kind of in its earliest stages at this point. I know it's gone through 3 phases already, but until it goes to council, all of these things that we're talking about is really where Kirk and his colleagues will start to pull these out and decide what to do with all of it. This is really a report and an inventory, and it's like a living document that's going to be continually looked upon and edited and added to and as we continue with it. So I hope that helps to give a different viewpoint of what it might be.
Can I add one last thing? This is We talked about prioritization, but this is the prioritization. This is sort of level one, the very high level. When we look at the entire township as a whole, that's why we did this study. We wanted to determine where are the areas that are really important for us to look at and to start doing much more detailed work on. So that's what we did through this study. We identified these 18 areas. Some are much easier to address than others in terms of protection measures. And that's what we will be bringing forward to council.
That's a great way to sum it up. Kirk.
Thanks, Philip. Just further to your comment a few moments ago, Mariana, you mentioned that the CHLs could have phrasing that says you have to go through a heritage impact assessment if you plan to do any work within the CHL. Is that something you could put into the document you bring to council? Because one of my concerns is that as soon as some of these CHLs get identified, any developers or anyone wishing to make changes will rush them through real quickly before there is any restrictions. And so forcing a heritage impact assessment would be probably a good first step.
Okay, good comment, Mariana.
Did the opposite there. So when we come forward to council, we are proposing some language like that that's going to be probably going to impact the official plan policies and requiring HIAs. What we do and what Kitchener and Waterloo have both done, to my understanding, is that obviously these things don't happen quickly, unfortunately, or quickly enough, but when you have language in there where you do where you have designated buildings, for example, or heritage resources that are considered significant, and significant again is defined as is protected. So all those definitions, it's very important to understand the nuances between them in the legislation. But when you do have protected heritage properties and any development that's happening adjacent to them, you can ask for a heritage impact assessment. And that heritage impact assessment now can be framed within the CHL study as well. So we can say there is a significant property here that you need to assess impacts on, but also in the broader context of this property is located within a CHL, and you need to speak to the merits of the application in light of the CHL study and it being identified through that. So we can do that relatively quickly, that type of request or information that would need to come forward. So while some of these things might take a while, when we come forward to council, which I anticipate to be relatively soon, like within the next few months, we will have some of that language and that ability. The main thing here is for council to endorse it. So once it's endorsed by council, at least we have a framework to move forward to tell the public, council has endorsed this and these are the 18 CHLs. So you need to give more consideration to anything happening in these areas, but we will also need to qualify what that means. So it's not necessarily a small scale application that will need to do a full heritage assessment within a CHL, but we're talking about the much larger redevelopments that are happening.
Good. Kirk, does that satisfy what you were getting at? It seems to me you could actually follow up with some questions now even after the meeting, subsequent to the meeting, just as we go forward. I think what I'd like to do is try and bring this to a discussion to the point where we can entertain a motion here. Because I think we're kind of at that point. We're sort of talking now about what we do after we've taken this to council. So let's get through what we need to do now as a committee, which is entertain the motion to recommend endorsement, I believe, of the study by council. So Nico, were you prepared to bring that motion forward that we discussed at our last meeting? That we could.
Yes, at this point, given that there may be adjuncts in terms of the proposal to council, would it be fair to suggest that we endorse the document in principle, or do we want just a flat out endorsement? And I guess I would just open that up to the committee just to
Why don't
see whether.
you bring forward the motion and then we'll discuss it?
Okay. Just one moment, please.
I believe that's okay, right? Devlin, we can talk about it once we've got something to discuss.
Okay, so the motion that I would propose would be that Heritage Center Wellington endorse the heritage landscape study identified in the report known as the Cultural Heritage Landscape Study for the Township of Center Wellington and prepared by Archaeological Services, Inc.
Okay, and are you prepared to move that motion then? Nico, I'm assuming you're the mover of it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I can move that motion.
And then who would we have second that? Don? Okay, so we've got
The wording is fine with me. So
Right.
I think that's
Okay.
that's worded nicely.
Okay, so yeah, we can go ahead and discuss the motion. Nancy?
I just wanted to make sure I understand. Are we endorsing it or are we recommending that council endorse it? Because the way Nico had suggested it was the committee was endorsing it.
I think I confused the issue with my statement. So what are we doing, Mariana?
I think we're
We are.
looking for and the committee to endorse it.
Okay,
I mean, you
So-
can go further to say that the committee recommends that council endorse the study as well. But right now we're looking for, I believe that the committee is actually endorsing the study. That's what council's going to want to know.
Yeah.
okay, fair enough. Good, a good distinction. Thank you, Nancy, for bringing that up and clarifying that for us. Any other comments or questions then on the study is in support of it or in terms of the motion? Okay, in that case, then I'm just going to go ahead and we can do our vote then. All in favor of the motion? Please raise your hands so I can see. Okay, I can't. Okay, great. I saw everybody now. And please, anyone, okay, opposed? Okay, so I think we had a unanimous in favor, none opposed, so the motion's carried. Okay, thank you very much, folks. That was good. I think this will then proceed to council, but it will also be coming back to us so that we can continue to use this now as a tool that, assuming council endorses it, then we'll have it as a tool that we can use moving forward. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our two next project funding requests, 5.4, the Elora, the Model Village project, 1820 to 1920. And I'm not sure, was there anyone here to speak to that funding request, Devlin?
There is not. Phil, we have Pierre for items 7.2, 195 Geddes Street.
Sure.
Citizen request to delegate. He's been in the waiting room for about an hour.
Okay,
If it's okay with the committee, maybe we should bring him in
Sure.
now.
good. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Sure, all right, so we will come back to these other two requests and just want to get that up because I don't have it handy here.
Sorry, Phil, I just let Don back into the meeting as well because he
Okay,
know that we're making this change, so we'll have to let them know.
Sure. Don? Yeah, you're back because we've decided to move to item 7.2,
Okay.
which is because we have a delegation for that. And so we don't want to keep Pierre waiting any longer, which is citizen request to designate. So Mariana, perhaps you can give us a little background on that, and then we can. This is an information item only. We're not being asked to do anything in terms of pass any motions or do anything with it this evening. So Mariana, go ahead.
Sure. Am I? Okay, I'm not muted. So let me just go to the item here. I want to make sure I get this all correct here. So this is concerning the property at 195 Geddes Street, which is at the southeast corner of Geddes and Moyer. And we had a request that was provided and is in your agenda from members of the public to designate this property. So I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to read it, but they are requesting designation, and I believe it's in light of a proposed redevelopment on some adjacent properties that are near this building. But I will say that this is this property, there's no proposal to demolish this building. So they have identified it as the Connan block, within the Connan block, and as a building owned by Thomas and John Connan. I provided some research to the committee in this regard that I obtained, so it does confirm that information. And but I will say, and I know that Pierre will probably speak to this, that there are no plans here to demolish this building. It will be, it will remain, and through any of the redevelopment that's happening around it. And there is no application for this site or demolition request. So there is an application adjacent to this that is the subject of a minor variance that's being heard this week by the Heritage Committee, or sorry, the Committee of Adjustment. And it is adjacent to this property, but again, not, there's no proposal regarding this property itself. So I hope that provides sufficient background information.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Okay, so one of the things that we could consider is having a discussion with Pierre Chauvin about the property, and also consider referring this perhaps to the designation subcommittee at the same time. There's also the possibility that we could do a site visit as well. So that's something else that we could that can come out of this information item this evening. So perhaps what I'll do is just welcome Pierre to the meeting, and just allow him to go ahead and speak to the request to designate, and perhaps give us some background from his point of view as to where he stands. Or
sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Pierre Chauvin. I'm a partner with MHBC Planning. We're land use planners as well as heritage consultants. So my other partner, Dan Curry, who is our heritage person, is not with me this evening, but he is fully aware of what is going on. My client owns several properties on this whole corner. That includes the old former, for some of you who recall, Little Katie's, and the now Sante building is on that building, the Connan block, 27 Moyer and 23 Moyer, and 196 Princess Street. So that whole block is owned by under one ownership. There is an application right now to build a stacked townhouse dwelling on Moyer Street. So I guess behind 19, I'm forgetting the address, is 195 Geddes, and which is the request before you. And as Mariana said, we're not touching the building, the heritage building. This is a listed building, as is the the house at 196 Princess, it is also listed. We still need to go through site plan approval process where we fully anticipate the design, the heritage attributes will be considered and discussed with staff to ensure that the building that we're constructing is compatible and sensitive to those listed properties. But at the end of the day, we're not intending to touch those properties either now or in the future. In fact, my client is actually not averse to the designation, but they in fact intend to, they've been talking to a stonemason as we speak to look at perhaps fixing the facade and exterior of that building and restoring it to its whatever it may be underneath the plaster that's there. So that, you know, we are looking into that, certainly not adverse to the designation. However, we do have a second phase to this project, which is to redevelop the old Sante or Little Katie's building into a mixed use building. And that's probably what's garnered a lot of attention by some folks in the community, given the proposed height that we had suggested. It's still proposed. There's no formal application yet before the township. We are doing a heritage impact assessment as part of that application, but that's something that I'm sure council and committee, your committee will probably review at some point in the future. But again, that's not only for the future, but not touching the building at the corner of Geddes and Moir. So again, not averse to the designation and certainly welcome it, but we'd rather deal with that designation, frankly, within the context of our future application on the broader, the larger building. So I think I'll leave it at that. I don't want to delve. If people want to ask about the minor variants that we're doing, I'd be happy to answer those questions. But I think just here to answer any questions and ask that if you do consider the designation, that we do it in the context of the zone change, and I ask that you kind of defer this decision until a later date. So those are my comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Very complete presentation in terms of what we're interested in finding out about tonight, certainly. So for informational purposes at this point, or perhaps recommendations also as to where we go with this particular item this evening, I'll just go ahead and open up for anybody who has questions or comments from the committee. Sherry?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said you were going to do with Asante. I heard stacked houses, townhouses, I think, for one side, but what was going to be for the building?
I was
Sherry, you're a little bit hard to hear there. Maybe you can
okay, sorry.
do that whole question
no.
again.
Sorry, I heard stacked townhouses was going to be in the one building, and then adjacent to it, you were saying that the old Little Katie's or Asante was going to be, and I didn't hear what you were going to put in there.
Yeah, the plan is to have a multiple residential building, an apartment building there. So again, it'll be, my client is into the rental housing market, so it'll be rental housing.
Rental, okay.
And with ground floor commercial. So they will replace the commercial on the main street, which should, and right. Then above will be residential.
Okay.
Nanette?
I just want to ask why you want to defer the designation. I just want to be clear on why you want to do that.
Sure. I think we ourselves are already doing a heritage impact assessment, and we're looking at, again, the development of a complete site. So I think it would be better to deal with the entirety as a comprehensive package, as opposed to as a piecemeal. And as the recommendations come forward from council on presumably a future application, they could also recommend that that building is designated, and that could be the outcome of that process. Just so in my view, it just allows for a more comprehensive assessment of all the issues, as opposed to dealing with these things on a piecemeal basis. But really, we're in your hands. If that's the desire, then we're no issue with it. But I think it would make more sense to deal with things more comprehensively.
Any other questions? Nico?
Just for my own edification and possibly anybody else that's listening, when you talk about a stacked townhouse, could you just explain that to me a little bit in terms of what that means?
Sure. When you think of a street townhouse, they're divided vertically along the street. So we not only have in a stacked townhouse, it's divided vertically as well as horizontally. So another way of calling it is a plex unit. Some people call them like a 10-plex, or this is an 8-plex unit. So there are units on the ground, sort of divided on the horizontal plane as well as on the vertical plane. Does that make sense? So then there will be separate entrances to each unit with entrances at ground level, and then so they would walk up to their upper units or the lower units, etc. So in this case, this building, it's a 3-story building. It's fully compliant with the building height and the zoning. The only thing that we're requesting is there's a requirement, because it's zone C1, there's a requirement that there should be any residential use beyond the 2nd story. We're designing these spaces to be flexible so that they have the height of a commercial unit, a typical commercial space, additional like 10, 12, I believe it's, don't quote me on this, it's over 10 feet in terms of floor to ceiling height for the ground floor commercial, but it also can be converted if the market is there. And we all know the need for rental housing. If the market is there, then it can be used for residential. And so that's the nature of the minor variance application.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pierre. Don, go ahead.
Yeah, so Pierre, there's 2 projects though, right? So we're not trying to complicate it. Is that true that there's another project? Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify that with everyone. And this is where the townhouse, the vertical townhouse comes in. Is that what you're suggesting, is that the ground floor could be converted to residential? Okay, so I understand that. So I think that helps, I think, with what Nico was asking. But I know that there's the complexities of it is because you're asking us to consider waiting until the entire project, which is this other property that's adjacent to it. Is that the case?
Yes, that is the case. So we're calling this phase 1, but there is a subsequent phase which includes this mixed-use building fronting on Geddes, and we're in the process of preparing the studies to file that application, which is probably in the next few months.
Okay, all right, thank you.
What's the timing on the heritage impact assessment then, Pierre?
It'll be submitted with the application, so the next few months.
So that's all going forward together. So we'll, and
Correct.
that would be something that we would have obviously access to as well. It'll come back to us at that time, right?
Correct. And
Yeah.
in fact, Mariana mentioned some of the background information that she shared with you about the Connan block, and she has shared that with our heritage folks as well. So we're aware of the same information that you have, and we are studying the impacts of that proposal relative to the Connan block, as well as all the other heritage buildings in the area.
Very good, thank you. I see Kirk, and then I saw Don, and then Nanette. Go ahead, Kirk.
Thanks very much, Phil. This is probably a question for Mariana. If that building, the Connon block, was designated on its own instead of part of a package, would the heritage impact assessment for the proposed 6-story building be impacted? Would it have more impact on the heritage impact assessment if it was sitting beside a designated heritage building? And in that context, should we be going ahead and doing it first instead of waiting for the 6-story building process to come through?
So it would be if the applicant wasn't prepared to do one anyway. So, I mean, the difference here is they're already doing an HIA. So while a designation could require it under the Planning Act, basically, we're allowed to ask for certain studies, and then the provincial policy statement speaks to adjacency to a protected heritage property. And as I said previously, protected is designated. If there was some threat that there wouldn't be that assessment done, then the committee could consider designating or could go to council to ask council to designate. The property is already listed, as is the one on the other side. So we're already going to be studying impacts of the 8-plex or the stacked town. So the building that's going to go sort of between those two corner heritage buildings, that is going to be studied through the site plan process, and it will need to fit in, as Pierre already said, compatible with the neighborhood, with the heritage buildings adjacent. So that's going to be taken into account on the site plan. But when it comes to the rezoning application that's coming in, there is a heritage impact assessment coming in already. So the designation will not change that one way or another, the requirement itself. And then any information that comes through the heritage impact assessment, any recommendations, we will ask to be implemented through the zoning application. So it would be tied to the rezoning that council would be approving or not approving. So there could be recommendations to try to protect that property would come in at that time. So there is, the only advantage I see is that designation would actually require the recommendations to be implemented to protect that property. So it's based on the level of comfort that you have that the information is going to be processed and is going to be reviewing the impacts on these heritage resources and on that property itself at 195 Geddes, and whether you want that done now or done later. The applicant has already indicated that they're not averse to designation. So the property would in fact be protected and designated through the process and will be evaluated regardless through the heritage impact assessment in terms of impacts.
Can I just sort of a follow-up to Kirk's question then, Mariana? Would the heritage impact assessment help inform a future designation?
Yes, it would, because it would talk about the value of the property and it would list the heritage attributes that would be protected. So the heritage impact assessment typically helps inform the process of designation, yes, or we could do that in advance on our own, prepare the statement of significance. So that's really what designation requires. It's preparing that statement of value and listing the heritage attributes, but that would all be studied through the heritage impact assessment. So essentially the applicant would be doing the work. And we would have to approve that as well. It would come to the Heritage Committee for approval, and then it would ultimately go to council for approval for that notice of intent to designate that property.
Okay, I just want to make a comment here on our time. And then we've got about 25 minutes to run. We've got a number of issues going forward. So, but I want to make sure that we give ourselves time to on this information item, come to a good consensus on where we think it needs to go. So I think that seeing Nico put up his hand here, I'm going to go to Nico And I'm wondering if Nico, you could perhaps also comment as the chair of the subcommittee for designated properties.
Yes. Well, first of all, my question. Whether the 195 Geddes Street is designated or not at this particular phase, does it make a difference whether the property is designated now or designated within the context of a zoning variance? Does that have any impact on setbacks, whether it's designated now or designated in the future? I guess that's my question. And certainly as far as the designation committee is concerned, I'm presuming, I'm looking at my colleagues in that committee, that we'd be prepared to have a look at that further.
So just quickly to answer your question then, whether now or later. So setbacks and height and those things are determined by the zoning bylaw. And then their application that's going to come forward is going to request something. We don't know what yet, but it may request an increase in height. The heritage impact assessment that's prepared will inform that, will help inform that in terms of what that's going to look like and whether it can be supported or not, and what recommendations are made from a compatibility standpoint in terms of impacts on that heritage property. So it will make, as a heritage impact assessment does, it assesses the application itself it measures it against the development proposal. So it talks about what the impacts are and then what recommendations might be from most preferred to least preferred. And then, you know, what is chosen in order to be implemented to move forward. So that's the way it's framed. So the zoning itself, like the setbacks are, they're informed, they're basically informed by recommendations that made in the heritage impact assessment for how to deal with a new building against the existing heritage resources. I hope does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to just add one more question then for Pierre is you're planning on this specific building, 195 Geddes Street. You were talking about engaging a stonemason. I'm just wondering what's the timing on that and any modifications or changes to the look of that building or reconstruction of the interior? And is that something that you would be prepared to in lieu of the fact that it, you know, if we were to not go ahead with you know, an immediate designation, would you be prepared to come back and sort of show us where you're going with that building prior to doing anything, just so we can have make some comment or be reassured of what you're proposing for 195 Geddes Street?
I guess to answer your last question first, the short answer is yes, absolutely. My client has no problem doing that. I guess then to answer your first question, when, I don't know. And the more important thing is what is underneath the plaster. Is it of a quality that we even want to see exposed to the elements? So so we're still exploring, but definitely when we get moving forward and have more information, we'll definitely reach out to the committee and you know, hopefully present with you what the plans are and engage you in that process, because I think that building can present as a unique opportunity, gateway opportunity for the downtown core as you're coming from the north, from Salem. It's a prominent building on the corner, and if it is improved, it's only a bonus to that, and it'll help improve the whole sort of development as a whole. So that's definitely no problem in working with the committee in that regard. But I'm sorry, I don't have any specific timelines, but we'll certainly keep you apprised.
Okay, good. Don? Thank you. Thank you, Pierre.
I think to help to move it forward, then I'm suggesting that, from our history, that when you work with residents in their homes, and you have willing residents, like Pierre is suggesting, it works really well, and we've had excellent experience with that. And I think that maybe what would be helpful is to defer it until we see the heritage impact study. And it would be wonderful to work with the resident, not with your client, on these stages. And anytime that we've done that in the past, it's been a win-win for both sides. And even to one of the other agenda items that's coming up today, it potentially there'll be an historic plaque in front of this building, is what it sort of sounds like if we look at one of our other agenda items that's coming up today too. So I can certainly see that. That's just a little add-on there. But I think that might be an option, is to move it forward until we see the heritage impact study.
Okay, thank you very much, Don. I think I don't want to step all over that. I think what you just said is a great way to summarize our discussion. And what I'd like to understand then is, from the rest of the committee, is there a consensus then, based on what Don just said, that that's the way we will move forward at this time, working with deferring the actual request to designate, referring it to our subcommittee, and allowing the heritage impact assessment to move forward and to inform the process. Can I just say that there's a consensus around that, if I summarize that, Don?
That's well worded, yeah.
Okay, and so if that's the consensus, then I think that's your answer, Pierre. We'll defer this item for now, and we'll await the heritage impact assessment, and also we'll ask the subcommittee to gather together the information that we have so far without overloading them, because I know the designation subcommittee has all kinds of work. So I know Mariana can help with that too. Nancy, you go ahead.
I just have a question again about process. So on the agenda, it's an information item. So really we have no role today other than it's on our radar and what have you. So the citizen request to designate is something then that Mariana will respond to. Like, how I'm trying to wrap my head around what our role is in this, if this is just an information item.
Do you want me to speak to that, Phil?
Sure, go ahead. Thank you, Mariana.
So typically in the past, what we've done with these requests that have come from the public is refer them to the designation subcommittee to gather all of the research, which we've started to do, prepare a statement of value, which will be further informed by the heritage impact assessment that is prepared on the property. If that doesn't come forward, if, for example, it's just delayed for any reason, we can still pursue designation once we have the information that we need and prepare a statement of value and speak with the owner about, which heritage attributes would be maintained over time. And it's a consultative process that we undertake with any property owner when we go through designation. So it would be referred again to the subcommittee, and then start that process of discussion with the owner. And then hopefully we'll have other pieces come forward. And the subcommittee will update this committee, the full committee, on the work that it's doing as we move forward on that as well.
And that's a very good question, Nancy. Thank you for that, because it helps complete this part of the discussion. So I think, the final component to this is for Devlin to include in the minutes this discussion, some of the key points of the discussion, and one being that while the designation has been deferred, it sounds like our committee is certainly in favor of going ahead at some point to designate this property. So I think that would summarize it well. Thank you very much, Pierre, for being here tonight, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again in the future.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So So I'm going to move us back to 5.4, and I'm almost tempted to go to 5.5 as well, because we have two funding requests. And I'm wondering, the last time we discussed 5.4 was in the context of looking for money to help publish this book. If we all recall the model village, and I think at that time we wanted to find out what sort of funds we had available. And the same went for the funds that were available to finance a plaque for the Connan project that would be in this area, commemorating the Connan block. So maybe, Mariana, you have that information for us, then we can perhaps at least agree in principle to provide some support if that's what we want to do.
Yes, so thank you. I do have the some of the budget numbers, and the Heritage Committee, as you know, has a budget for the work that it does yearly. And we have it sort of separated into a few key areas or accounts. But we also, I think what we need to understand here is what the work plan is for the rest of the year to move forward. There's we haven't used any of the designation money. So that fund basically allows us to designate properties, put in the newspaper notice, and register the bylaw. We do have, and maybe, I'm not sure if this can be informed at all by the designation subcommittee, but we'd have to determine how many we plan to do this year. We have $3,000 in that budget, and each designation, I believe, is just under probably approximately 1,000. It's very approximate because it depends on the cost of the newspaper ad, which can be quite lengthy because you have to put the entire, the notice is quite extensive. So, and then there's the registration fee, that's the legal fee. So typically $3,000 would allow us to do 3 to 4 designations, I would say, over the year. We also have a public relations budget and a professional fees budget of about $2,500 each. And through each of those come the research that we do periodically, and the newspaper advertisement that we actually recently did for Heritage Week. Was it Heritage Week? So some funds have already come out of those accounts. And so in short, we do have some money, but I think we would just need to be satisfied that we have sufficient funds left till the end of the year to do the work we want to do. And I would want to understand exactly what the amount was that was being requested. So there were 2 projects. There was the one which was the Connan plaque, which I think Beverly Cairns confirmed, and Devlin might want to speak to this. Was it 2,000 that they're asking for?
2,000 was the amount, but they were happy with any amount that could be provided.
Okay, and I think the same for the book publishing was they sort of were happy with any amount, but they did give us an amount last time, I believe. I can't recall that. Does anyone have that number? What they requested last time?
It's from us, or what they were going to need?
500?
I thought they asked around 500.
That number's in my head too. I'm just wondering, do you recall what the total price they were looking to raise, the amount?
That's what I'm not sure of here.
I thought they'd said something about 20,000 to bring it to printing and.
Okay, yeah, I think you.
Yes, but I thought they had raised some of that already.
Yes, they have a donor, I believe, for 10 grand.
Mhm.
Again, I think either one would take whatever the committee could provide. And so I think if the committee wants to make a suggestion for how much this committee would like to contribute, then we can determine whether there would be sufficient funds left. I know that we were planning to do, so there's about 1,800 left in our public relations account. And we were planning to do another newspaper ad in the summer regarding the the Heritage Awards. and some other items that we wanted to bring to public attention. So the last ad we did was $700, so it would probably be around that same cost. So we might have about 1,000 left over in that account if we do nothing else for the balance of the year from a public relations standpoint. With the professional fees budget, again, there's approximately that same amount, but we also use that account for a lot of research that we do throughout the year. So I wouldn't want to really diminish that account too much. And with the designation subcommittee, do you want to hazard a guess as to how many properties we might want to designate in the near future this year? I know we have one sort of on.
Yeah, I think 3 might be fair in terms of kind of based on our last meeting. Certainly one maybe pending.
All right, so it would, so you're saying 3, so that's basically the budget we've got.
For designation,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So it looks like the only place we'd have some room would be maybe the Public Relations Fund, which there's about 1,800 right now left. And if we put in another newspaper ad, we could have about 1,000 left.
Okay.
We could-
Nan?
I
Sorry.
was just going to say, the only thing is with the pandemic, I doubt that we're going to be doing a whole lot for doors open in June unless we really get moving between now and then. But you did circulate some information with regard to some online courses that are available. So I don't know if we're going to be doing any kind of advertising. Do you remember that? You circulated, Mariana, at the beginning of the month, online workshops for heritage homes, and they've asked us to let people know about that. So I don't know if there's any kind of cost associated with advertising those courses that are available online.
We do have a course seminar training budget as well that would allow for that separately.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure because that's the only thing that I'm aware of. If it may be skipping to the item in the agenda, but that would be on the radar for our committee, given the pandemic situation.
Okay, what I'm going to suggest here, and I just want us to, is do we have a consensus that, given that we have some funds, that we deem these worthy, that we can find some funds available, that these projects then would be worthy of some funding from Heritage Center Wellington? I think, perhaps we could establish that, and then we could go back and determine just the actual amounts that might be reasonable based on the particular situation. So what I would want you to just comment on quickly is, and you don't need to comment, but do we feel that these are the sorts of things we would want to contribute some amount of money to?
Mhm.
And
I
yeah,
agree.
just a yes or a wave or a nod of the head. Or if you're hesitant and you don't think so, you speak up as well. So, okay, so Nancy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't have the benefit of the previous discussions that you had with regard to the model village and what have you, but I guess the caveat of any donation towards funding would be that they were able to raise enough to do it. Because did I hear somebody say it was quite a large sum for the model village book publishing? I mean, a plaque is pretty standard if that's what the Connan project is.
Yeah.
But the book publishing might be something that's more costly. So depending on how much we donate, unless it's with the condition that it proceeds, that they get enough funding to do it with our, in addition to our contribution. I don't know how that caveat would work.
And there might also be a caveat to, depending on the amount we donate, whether or not there would be any acknowledgement of that in a book or in at some point. So I'm going to say that the committee looks like there's a consensus that we would support these projects, but that we'll need to go back and take a look and see what's appropriate and appropriate amounts based on our sort of on that budget. And I can work with Mariana to maybe just come up with a recommendation for the committee as to, based on what the overall budget looks like for the rest of the year, what we would recommend, without sort of prejudicing one project over the other. Perhaps we could come up with a certain amount of money that would be fair. Christine?
I just found my notes. Last time they said 20,000 was needed. They have some editors in place. The 5,000 from a private donor, not 10 as my mind said. I just wanted to clarify the private donor.
Yeah, and I think it's a good comment Nancy made that, the money would be contingent on the funding on the project going forward, having achieved its funding goal. Sure. Okay, can I say that we have a consensus then to support them, and we'll come back to you with a recommended, with some recommended amounts at the next meeting? Okay. Do we need to do anything with that? I think that's all we need to do, Devlin? Yep. Subcommittee reports then, quickly. Public Relations Education Subcommittee. I think the only thing there was we are working on the designate, on the commemorative plaque. And Nancy's made some comments to, and we can circulate, would we circulate that prior to a meeting in some information, Mariana, so that others could comment on it? Or would we just present it in a future agenda, the wording?
Yeah, I think we could try to finalize the wording based on the research from the HIA that we have, and just basically provide it to the committee for comment or information.
And I
before
should.
It's finalized.
I'm sort of.
That would be the next meeting for sure, because that would be, I know they need it by June. So for the May meeting, we'll provide that to the committee.
This is for a bridge for WG.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. The Bain Bridge for WG, the commemorative plaque on the bridge that the committee commented on a couple months ago.
Nancy?
Mariana, what's the status of the plaque that Jean and I worked on for, I'm sorry, the address is gone, that log home that they.
McNabb. Yes, yeah. I was going to look into that one as well, and I have not yet, sorry. But thank you for bringing it up again. I'll look into it and I'll email you very quickly.
Designated Properties Subcommittee. Nico, did you have anything to add?
Mariana, maybe a quick commentary about students. I believe that they'd done some work on bylaws, had they?
Oh, you're talking about the old updates to the designation bylaws?
Yeah.
Yes, we had talked about that and we were looking at that, but we were trying to focus on whether there are some outstanding designations that need to be done. And then we'll be looking at, I think I handed out a list and to the subcommittee of the ones that have been updated. And then we will prioritize those to see if there's a few that we feel are very outdated and then just could benefit from an update to the bylaw itself. And especially in light of whether we feel that it's in an area under threat or there might be some proposed redevelopment around it. So that's how we will assess those.
Well, just in the interest of time, just to say that the committee is actively looking at some properties. I can go through them all if you think that that's necessary, but we can come back with a more fulsome report at the next meeting. How would that be?
That sounds good. I think there's nothing between now and then that we couldn't wait to the next meeting to hear that. I think that's a good comment. And as far as municipal register subcommittee, there hasn't been anything done on it this month. Basically, I think we've got photographs are done. And so we're just having to, I think we were trying to move the cultural heritage landscape study, bring it forward. And so we'll be able to get back to the municipal register and getting some, I think we need to do some, look at some of the properties in town and write some descriptions, and also assess the properties that are out in the rural areas for whether or not they should be listed. So is there anything more to that, Mariana?
All the properties that needed descriptions are done. just
Oh,
so
are they?
you're
Okay,
aware.
beautiful.
Yeah.
How'd
So
that
we had
happen?
somebody, there was some redeployment that happened in the
Okay.
township. And so we got some work done that was waiting and really needed to be done. So it was a good opportunity for some staff to do that. So that's done, as well as the photographs that were taken for the register. So yes, we're moving along, and we've got quite a bit of work done in that regard.
Yeah, I love it when that happens. That's great. Okay, thank you. Nico, did you, I know there's been a lot of different, discussion on the Healthy Growth Advisory Committee, that update.
Right.
How did you want to deal with that this evening? Do you want to give us something on that, or? Yeah, I don't want
Of course,
to.
all those meetings are open to the public for viewing. Suffice it to say at this point that we have decided to split into two subcommittees. One to look at more financial aspect, and this is all under the umbrella of attainable housing. The other is more of a policy discussion. And so those committees will be convening in the near future. And then we will have a student report forthcoming. And Mariana, maybe you can just talk about that very briefly.
Just quickly, we've had students from the University of Guelph Rural Planning Program prepare a lot of the background research, and in order to achieve definition for what attainable housing means, and some targets for the township to help us move forward on how to, again, how to provide more attainable housing in the township, and determine what barriers there are and what opportunities there are to move that forward more quickly. So we're anticipating that that's going to be presented to the next Healthy Growth Committee on May 5th. So the first Wednesday morning of May, if anybody's interested in watching the meeting or in obtaining more information through the agenda.
Good.
That's all on that one.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we had to rush that at the end, because the Healthy Growth Advisory Committee right now is doing some really important work. So if you do find that you have some time to watch the meeting itself, that probably informs you, that would inform you as well. Okay, I think that completes our meeting agenda for the evening. Sorry, we went over a little bit, but we did get a lot done. There were several motions there we needed to bring forward. Sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to just mention the email from, because it's May 1st is the first, the Old Home Living is talking about, they wanted us to advertise. Is there something that we should be doing between now and then in terms of these online workshops that appear to be available to our residents?
Well, is anybody on the committee interested in doing the course, the online workshops? Because that's one thing, you can sign up for that. And then I'm not sure how we would distribute that. That's the problem.
Is it something we could put on the website in terms of, for your information? It wouldn't cost anything just to say this is being offered by this magazine. Here's the link, and are interested, they could do
I can talk to our communications coordinator about maybe linking that on our heritage page.
Okay, I just don't know what your policies are in terms of
right. I don't
certain kinds of things.
Yeah, that I'm not sure about. That's why I wasn't sure about broader distribution, because it's not, we don't necessarily keep a list of email or contact information for our designated or listed property owners that might benefit. So unless we're prepared to do, I mean, it's difficult to say. I was more curious about whether the committee itself, committee members would want to join that and sign up, because there's some useful information in there as well that would benefit the committee.
Can we, was that something that was sent out, I believe, in to us as a circulated information?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I
it's
can
in,
recirculate.
maybe, why don't we do that? And
Okay.
then
I'll
we can,
recirculate.
and I'll connect with you, Nancy,
Okay.
and Mariana, just to discuss the website as well, and just sort of follow up on that too. Good. Thank you for bringing that up, because I kind of rushed through that portion of our public relations. So thank you for, again, bringing that up. Christine, you're going to get last word here.
Good. Two things. I would love to volunteer to do that online course. I think it will help me personally just deepen my understanding of the world that I've just entered. So I would be happy to do that. Secondly, I didn't feel comfortable raising this with our guest Pierre, but it seemed to me that the people who own 195 Geddes right now wanted to get a designation, thinking that it might alter what happens in the environs around them. And I got that sense because of some of the wording that they had put in their letter to us. Is there some animosity going on between the owners of the building and then Pierre's clients?
I believe Pierre's clients are the owners of the building, are they not?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, they own the 195 Geddes?
Yes.
Oh, okay, pardon me.
But
And I
Okay.
just,
it
sorry.
was the citizens that came forward and said they had
Yes.
concerns.
Oh.
Yeah.
So then it's the owners that's responding and saying, we have no problem with you designated, but we just want you to wait to do it. Is how
Right.
It's a very complex issue that I think will come back to our committee quite a few times.
Yeah. And we didn't give up anything this evening
No.
by way of any of the options or tools.
And I think Kirk's questions too are ones in which are broader questions that council and even ourselves will probably have to deal with. So it's not going away. I think it's going to be with us for a while, this one. So.
But thank you for thinking of that, Christine. If you reread that those letters in that context, perhaps that will, and certainly if you've got questions, you can also bring those questions to Mariana and
Okay.
and myself during the coming weeks.
Okay. It was the comment of the proposed redevelopment of an 8-plex and a 6-story retail residential tower places not only the Connan block, but also the entire Elora heritage area at risk. That's why I thought they were different owners.
Yeah.
And that's an adjacent property. It's very complex, but
Yes.
the overall is that hopefully this building will be designated is the end result. That's it. We're interested in it. So that's.
So I don't want to cut it off, but I think
let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, folks. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and if there's no objections, and just a comment that May 11th will be our planned next meeting for Heritage Center Wellington. Thank you, everyone, for spending the evening with us and helping move the Heritage Committee forward. Thank you.